markets are doing in order to be able to operate their businesses under Executive Order 53 and 55, and the best practices, protocols, guidelines that are out there, some of the challenges and opportunities that we've had, and the solutions that we've come up with in order to be able to meet the demands of our communities. I'm going to start the presentation talking about just kind of the overview of the picture of what's been going on and what the protocols are, and share with you some of the best practices that markets have been doing and how we've been working with and what we've been able to accomplish with Parks and Rec and city councils and a variety of different resources in order to get markets open and keep them open. And I will be joined today with amazing stakeholders and partners of the Virginia Farmers Market Association, who will also be providing information. After my presentation, we will be hearing from Howard Herman, who is the Farmers Market Manager in Falls Church. After Howard, and he will be talking about all of the hurdles that he had encountered from municipalities in order to get his market open, and what they were able to do in order to some of the guidelines and protocols that we were able to work with, working specifically, working with the VDACs in order to work to get them open and operating, and how that's been going for them. After Howard, we're going to be talking with Meredith Ledlie Johnson, who's going to share with us. Meredith is the Meredith has a new title, so I'm actually going to read it. Meredith is the Policy Systems and Environmental Change Programming Coordinator for the Family Nutrition Program with the Virginia Cooperative Extension out of Virginia Tech. So Meredith is going to talk to us about SNAP and SNAP Ed and how you can utilize that at farmers markets with online pre-order as well as site marketing now. And then the last component of our webinar today is going to be Riko Metzroth with Farmers Insurance. We have worked hand in hand with Riko for the past couple of years on insurance and financial assistance to farmers, producers, and farmers markets in Virginia. Riko is an amazing and very knowledgeable individual on these pieces, and he's going to talk with us today about two different tracks. He's going to talk about general liability during COVID-19 and what that means to you as producers and farmers markets. And then he's going to talk about financial services that are out there, from the financial packages that are out there through the CARES Act, the Small Business Association, and opportunities for y'all to be able to get those resources. So, and then we'll wrap up with next steps and the rest of I will do a brief analysis of the rest of the webinar series that we will be hosting after today. So with that, I'm going to get started. Mary went over the logistics. Please keep yourself muted, and please use the chat box to raise your hands, and Mary will be capturing that information. So just in case you all do not know, farmers markets in Virginia are open, and this has gotten to be my little bone of contention, where I see out on social media people that are saying that farmers markets are not open in Virginia. They are. VAFMA has worked hand in hand with the Virginia Department of Agriculture, Department of Health, and the governor's office from the start of COVID-19 here in the state to put together protocols and guidance that will make sure that our markets are open and that we are operating efficiently and effectively. I think where the confusion has come in and where some of the concerns with municipalities have come in is that we are not deemed essential like other states. And so we have been deemed non-essential, meaning that the protocols that were established by the governor's office aligned with restaurants versus grocery stores. However, because of the fact that farmers markets are in food deserts and the supply chain has been crippled here in Virginia, we have been able to work with the Department of Agriculture in order to come up with a workaround. I think that the sheer partnership that we have with the Department of Health, with the Department of Agriculture, and with the governor's office has been instrumental in our ability to be able to get the markets not only open, keep them open, but doing more than just takeout and curbside, which was the original mandate that came down. And I was honored and thrilled to be able to work with them in order to get these markets open for all of us. The three areas of concern from the state and our commitment to them in being able to open the markets and to be able to run them the way that we have been utilizing the safety protocols is that we will be focusing on no congregation, on social distancing, and on low to no touch. And with our commitment to that, to putting those protocols in place with producers and vendors, then they have told us that we can sell agricultural, horticultural, hygiene, and products at farmers markets through pre-order, through curbside, and through site. You see in front of you pictures of the Falls Church Market, which shows both folks adhering to social distancing as they get ready to come into the market. Howard will talk a little bit more about this during his presentation, stuff that has been pre-ordered and pre-packaged by the vendors, and the signage that we're utilizing at the markets in order to very specifically let folks know what is and is not acceptable behavior at the market. The major concerns from the Department of Agriculture and the governor's office specifically as to why markets have not been deemed essential centers around the fact that farmers markets historically have been areas of social congregation, and we've done a tremendous amount of programming for children and music. It's a very social and a community type gathering place. And so in putting together these protocols that can be found on our website, as well as we will go through and talk about in more detail today, we have been able to guarantee that we are focused solely on being food access hubs, providing the necessary components to keep our communities healthy during this time of crisis. So when we start looking at the different areas of where we needed to put protocols in place, the first areas we needed to look at market operations. So we have different types of markets around the state of Virginia, and this is one of the other things that differentiates the Commonwealth from other areas like, say, California or Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., every farmer's market has to have a farmer's market vendor permit in order to be able to operate, and that is overseen by the city. And so if a market is not adhering to any of the strict criteria that is outlaid in the permitting process, that permit can be pulled. In the state of California, they actually have a certification program or a certification that a farmer's market has to have in order to be able to operate. And that is housed as part of the Farmers Market Association of California, as well as the Department of Agriculture. So if anybody is not adhering to specific protocols, if there's any type of egregious behavior, those can be pulled. In Virginia, we don't have anything like that. We are very fortunate in that we have a multitude of different types of farmers markets here in the state of Virginia, from those that are publicly owned, those that are privately owned, farmers markets that are nonprofit, farmers markets that are run by the extension, the cooperative extension, that are part of Parks and Rec, that are part of economic development, that are part of city governments like in Chesterfield. And we have the first ever state-run farmers market that is part of the governor's initiative to provide fresh food and vegetables to state employees here in Richmond, Virginia. Saying that, it means that if there is a market that decides not to adhere to the protocols, the state doesn't have any type, or Department of Agriculture doesn't have any type of mechanism in order to pull their permit, to shut them down, or to force them into adhering to it. Right now, under Executive Order 55, the penalty for not adhering to the executive order is somebody coming out and issuing a fine. And there's no way during this time of crisis that the state has the capacity or the manpower, the infrastructure to be able to adhere to that. And so those are some of the reasons why the state was very hesitant to, and has continued to hold firm on not issuing farmers markets as essential businesses. But what we found is that with all of the conversation, the thoughtful conversation, the leadership that we've been able to provide, the conversations with community leaders and food access around Virginia, we've been able to put together this workaround in conjunction with the Department of Agriculture and being supported by the governor, where in fact we are able to provide open site markets and markets where pre-order and curbside can be done, where people can purchase from menu boards, et cetera, where they can drive through, where they can do a variety of different mechanisms at the markets in order to still have access to the food that is so critical to the health of Virginia. So again, the primary concern with the market operations is the health and safety of our farmers and producers, the market shoppers, the market staff, and our host community. So the farmers markets in Virginia are very seriously taking safety precautions, including revising market operations, reducing the number of vendors, changing the market layout, expecting shoppers and vendors to abide by public health directives and new market protocols, and making a cultural shift from being a highly social gathering place to a proactively limiting time at the market and maintaining physical distances. We have sample plans, which you can see one here with the Charlottesville Farmers Market. They are a market that has 250 vendors in a downtown parking lot during a normal market season. They are year round, and then they have off-sites. So they have switched. So their municipalities took a little bit of time and thoughtful consideration of what would be best for their community. And they've set up this amazing pre-order and drive-through market. So you can see the map of the way that the market is laid out. They still have the food trucks and the food vendors, but they're providing takeout only, pre-order and takeout only, as well as the agricultural and the horticultural vendors, those that are doing hygiene products. And the crafts and artisans are prohibited at markets at this time. You can have an artisan craft vendor that is making hygiene products or face masks, for example. So there are a couple of exceptions, but it's all around safety. So you're not going to have the jewelry folks at the market right now, but you will have the soap folks and those that are sewing face masks and that are making medicinal products, etc. This is a picture of the probably one of the more visual of what we need to do. So a clear understanding was that we had to, as part of the market operations, limit egress into the market. So again, going back to Charlottesville, Charlottesville has 9 different entry and exit points. Colonial Williamsburg, another huge tourist market that goes across 2 huge streets in Colonial Williamsburg that has, I don't know, 12 different entry and exit points. And so markets are having to use tape, cones, safety barricades in order to close off the market. The pictures over at the bottom and on the right are of the South of the James Farmers Market, which is in a park and is overseen by Parks and Rec. So not only did they have to cone everything, but they also had to provide police presence and off-duty police presence and Richmond City staff in order to act as volunteers. Just as an aside, if markets don't have the vests and the cones and the tape and things of that sort, a lot of the markets are going to their local city council, the Department of Transportation, et cetera, in their communities, and they're able to provide those to them out of their warehouses so they don't have to purchase them. So look in your community, at your community, city council, and leadership in order to help you get some of these, if you don't have them, some of these different pieces. So in order to, because this is so entirely different, when you're talking about your market operations overall, you have to stay informed about what your local officials are recommending for any particular community and jurisdiction. As Commissioner Brana and Secretary Ring have stated, though they have worked with VAFMA hand in hand in order to put protocols and guidelines in place so that markets are not only able to open, but open and be providing safe experiences for the community, jurisdictions supersede state mandate. So they are not going to override what a city council or a city Parks and Rec official is going to mandate. But they will talk with them about what our agreement is with the different markets in the community on providing these safe atmospheres. So I'm happy to talk with you if any of you are having any challenges, et cetera, with the different folks. So you take South of the James, for example. I was happy to reach out to Parks and Rec and provide them with the different guidances that we'd worked on with the Department of Agriculture, connect the folks with assurances from the Department of Agriculture. Karen and Doug do an amazing job of effectively running the market, the South of the James Marketplace, which has thousands of people come through there on a pre-COVID-19 day and be able to set up doing drive-through, et cetera. But the city wanted assurances that they weren't going to have 5,000 people in the middle of the parking lot of this public park, congregating on a Saturday during COVID-19. And so in seeing what the guidelines were and the protocols that were being put in place and the assurances that this has been approved by the Department of Agriculture, they were able to work hand in hand with the city in order to get their markets up and running. So stay on top of what is being specifically mandated by your jurisdiction. And if you are having challenges, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to get involved and have conversations and or connect them with authorities in the state to assure them of what has been approved and the safety measurements that are in place. Provide clear and frequent communication with your vendors so they know about any market schedule, operational and other changes. Don't only rely on social media alone. Find a time to call them and email them so you are sure to reach them. We have found that, again, with having so many different types of markets around there, a lot of vendors are very technologically savvy and they are jumping on the bandwagon of doing online ordering and all of these platforms and doing all different types of curbside drop-off and boxes of produce and things of that sort. But then we have older producers that may not be technologically savvy and they may not be going to Facebook, or they may be in an area where broadband is not efficient. And we see that as a huge issue right now in Virginia. And so pick up the phone and call them and let them know that this is what is happening and these are the protocols. We are coming out of winter markets and the part-time and the year-round markets, and we're moving into spring and summer markets. And a lot of y'all are getting ready to open up your markets. So for the first time this year. So have very clear communication and don't assume that you know, they're reading what you're putting out there on social media. So provide clear and frequent communication with your shoppers and your local market community also via newsletters and social media. Markets send an email that the markets that are very effective are sending emails and they're posting on their social media before market, informing customers of the new guidelines and asking all folks who are sick to stay home. They're also letting vendors know that they should not feel at risk in any way to participate in the market. You cannot, as a market manager, force a vendor to participate in your market. They're scared, they have kids, they have family, and if they are concerned in any way, you cannot, you have to respect that they do not want to participate in the market. And if they cannot be comfortable with the protocols that you are putting in place in your market, then you need to let them experience that and not participate. Also, you must let your vendors know that if they are experiencing any symptoms for COVID-19, which we all know what those are at this point, but a fever or a dry cough, et cetera, they must stay at home and take care of themselves to protect themselves and others. The vendors and staff should not come to the market if they are sick and have any of these symptoms. And let them know that anyone who appears to be ill upon arrival to the market or becomes sick during the day will be sent home immediately. So, you know, be very clear on that as part of the protocols that you're putting in place. In addition to market operations, so we went through kind of this, I don't want to say it was very confusing. I was joking and saying that what was happening here in Virginia was so ever evolving that it was clear as mud. We would literally have protocols that would come out from the state at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and then by noon we'd have a different set of protocols that would come from a different office, and then by 6 we'd be hearing something different. And so there's a reason why there was so much confusion that was out there in the state. And so markets decided in the early days to just go ahead and adhere to drive up curbside. A lot of markets felt that the communities felt that this was better, that it was the easiest thing in order to be able to placate the municipalities and the city councils, and it got them open and being able to provide the most economical mechanism possible. What we have heard now that we are into several weeks of doing curbside and online ordering is that for the most part, the vendors really like it. It gives them the ability to be able to expand, to control their product lines. And I've had multiple vendors and producers tell me that they have made already 5 times, 10 times through the online ordering over the past couple of weeks than what they made last year as a whole during the farmers market season. So it's given them the ability to not only have control and to be able to determine what the needs are, but it also is giving them an opportunity to be able to look at what they're planting and determine what is the best fit for the community. And it's giving them the ability to be able to track through metrics and data what they're doing. The pictures that you have right here are, so we had a new market that was opening up in the Virginia Beach area. The market managers of Hampton Boulevard's Farmers Market, Amy Jordan and Michelle Asher, ran 2 successful markets last year, and they decided to expand to a 3rd market in the Virginia Beach area. And the 3rd market is the one that they were able to get open. So it was a brand new market for them. They opened it up in Virginia Beach. They partnered with O'Connor Brewing, and they did all pre-order through an online platform and drive-through. They had folks like south of the James did also. They have folks that put a card in the window of their car that has their name on it and their order number, and they drive up and they pick up their boxes of produce, or they drive through and pick up the different products. The one that you see in the top middle with all of the cones is the one of the markets down in the Blue Ridge area, and it is the Lynchburg Farmers Market. So the Lynchburg Farmers Market, the Lynchburg City Market, is an indoor market year-round. There's in a food desert, and then it has an outdoor market with all of their fresh agricultural and horticultural products. And so they were another one that worked, and they're under economic development, and they worked hand in hand with the folks in their community in order to get themselves open. They have had to, they block off and they do pre-orders. You are, and they're mapping their processes on our website, but they tell you what spots you can park in. They have very limited parking. It's in a very tight, busy downtown area. And so you come in and then you leave. The bottom 2 pictures where it says designated curbside pickup parking 15 minutes, this is the Blacksburg Farmers Market. So they're doing all online and curbside. So you pull in just like you're going to pick up your restaurant order. You pull in and you have your number in your car window, and you pop your trunk, and they come in and they put the stuff in your car. The top one is one of the Nova markets where they have hand sanitizer, and the rules sitting on the box. It's an exit only. They've got a dedicated entrance, and then they've got a dedicated exit, and they've got space for social distancing. And then they've got all of the different, you can see in the background where they've got stacks of all of the boxes of pre-order that folks made that are have their names on them, et cetera, that they can pick up. One of the things that we have highly recommended to farmers markets, since it is a new day and a new business model, is that they waive all vendor cancellation fees. You know, they also want to, we encourage folks to be prepared for people who see the market and are concerned that it's operating like business as usual, especially those that are doing site markets. And this is where your communication is critical, not only all of your social media communication, but also everything that you have at the market. So one of the farmers markets here in town shut down because they had, they're affiliated with a church, and they had a very public COVID-19 diagnosis. And so they went through all of the different protocols and decided that they were going to open up and do pre-order, et cetera. And they had posted out on social media that they were going to allow 30 people within their market at a time. And what they didn't explain is that their market was going to be stretched out so that 30 people would adhere to, and that their market was able to accommodate social distancing with 30 people. The perception, based on the communication that they put out, is that they were not, that it was business as usual, that they were not adhering to the parameters, et cetera. So we talked with them. I had phone calls from city officials wanting to know why this market was having so many folks in the market. And I explained that based on the layout of the market, the number of vendor booths, the amount of space, the way that they were reconfiguring the entire market, as well as all of the hygiene and safety protocols that they were putting in place, that the market could accommodate 30 people at that time. But I also had a conversation with the market stating, we probably don't want to publicize that. It's a matter of image and perception, because people don't understand that the market is going to be spread out. So be careful with what you're messaging. This is the market that was at O'Connor Brewing, where they had a very dedicated entrance, stating their sign stating very clearly that it was drive-through market only, pre-orders only, and then they had signs to exit the market also. Signage is key during this time. One of the other models that we have is, and I guess probably the biggest challenge that the markets are facing is how to aggregate all of the products. So we've got markets that are having the vendors do all of the pre-order themselves. And then we have markets that are doing the pre-order and they're taking it and then they're aggregating all of the products. So this is actually pictures of the Williamsburg Farmers Market. And they are doing all online orders. Everything is pre-packaged, as you see here, from all of the different vendors. And then folks can come in and they can do curbside, and the Williamsburg Farmers Market is doing delivery. One of the things that we have asked, and the Department of Agriculture and Department of Health has asked, is that all vendors pre-package their produce and their products. And so there has been some pushback from producers about this, but we want you to go ahead and clean it, the producers to go ahead and clean it and pre-package it at all possible, and before it's brought in. And the way that we promote this is through actively sharing with the community that this is one step above what is happening in the grocery stores, et cetera, where everything is set out for everybody to touch and handle, whereas at a farmer's market, everything has been pre-cleaned and pre-packaged individually for you as the consumer, so that, you know, we're limiting and back to that low touch, no touch. This is, again, the Williamsburg Farmers Market, how they've set up for the one vendor. This is where Haley's Honey has come in. So everybody ordered this stuff from Haley's Honey. Haley's Honey pre-packaged it with the person's name on it. Williamsburg Farmers Market will then take everything that has Kim Hutchinson's name on it, and they'll put it over into a box to be delivered and or for Kim Hutchinson to pick up. It's a lot of work that the markets are doing for pre-order, et cetera, but markets are open and they're being very successful. In addition to a pre-order and curbside pickup, you can come up to the market and you can buy from the market. You can do site purchasing, and we'll have several examples of that. One of the things that we've requested for markets that are doing on-site is that you have what I'm calling menu boards, sandwich boards, or some type of a board that shows what you can have for pre-ordering and or to purchase at the market. So the first one on the left are menu boards that are out through at fresh farms markets up in Nova, Maryland, and Virginia, DC and Virginia, and they put these pre-orders with their Facebook and their website at all of their markets so that vendors see this information. The picture on the right with the chalkboards is going into the entrance of the Lynchburg City Market so that people know what they can choose. Folks from the market sit at the table that's in between and they take the order there. Customers stay outside and the order is pulled by the folks from the Lynchburg City Market and brought out just as it would be as if you were ordering from a restaurant. Okay, so that's the big picture of like market operations and some of the different ways that markets are operating. Now let's talk about vendors and preventive practices. So we all know, because we have heard, if you're living in Virginia or you're living in the United States and you're not living under a rock, that we should be sheltering in place and sheltering at home unless we need to go out for essentials. And if we're going out for essentials, then we need to be wearing masks and gloves, and it needs to be only for things that are critical for the survival of our families. And so we have said that this is true for the farmers markets also, that not only do the vendors need to be, not only do the customers coming into the market need to be practicing these best practices, but so do the vendors. So again, going back to these three protocols that the Department of Agriculture is, specifically looking at us adhering to: no congregation, social distancing, and low touch, no touch. These are some pictures of how that's being incorporated into market. So the way that the markets are and the vendor booths are set up is that a vendor has to maintain, in order to adhere to social distancing, a vendor needs to maintain at least 10 feet of separation from themselves and other vendors. So the vendor booths need to be 10 feet around, not just in front. There needs to be 10 feet in front of them, but there also needs to be in the sides and behind them. And so that area needs to be, this is a math problem. You need to figure out what is that space. And then you look at how many vendors, if you're going to have agriculture and hygiene and horticulture vendors there, how many vendors is that going to be? What is the square footage of your space that you have to operate? And then how many vendors can you have? And then, to be able to have them 10 feet apart all around. So that's one piece of it. The second piece of it, as I said earlier, is the producers are pre-packaging and pre-bagging the produce. And we're telling them not to have, I mean, after all of these years of us, educating all of the vendors on, you'll get more sales the prettier your booth is and how you do your booth display. Now we're saying, okay, yeah, no, we don't want anybody touching product. We want all product that's out to be bagged or prepackaged. And what should be out is just display only. And so you can see here the vendors are actually putting up signs saying, let a vendor help you with your items or display only. You see, these are taken from Northern Virginia farmers markets over the past few weekends. So some of the pictures you'll see were taken early on in March before the masks and gloves. And these were taken this past weekend up in Nova, where the vendors themselves, you can see all the produce that's behind them as well as the produce that's in front of them is individually packaged. They're all wearing gloves and they're all wearing face masks and protective gear. Let's see. So we have told market managers that they need to, in addition to the 10 feet at a time, there should only be one customer at a booth at a time. So you see the booth in the middle, you've got one person that's at the booth and the person behind them is standing back 6 feet. And so we don't want 2 or 3 people up at a booth looking at items and touching them and waiting for their turn. It needs to be one customer at a time. Market managers are mandating that vendors wear masks and gloves and that customers wear masks and gloves, and that gloves are changed frequently. And that's something that you need to determine how frequently that is, because you don't want any type of bacteria to get on the glove and then everything that they're touching and or handing off, it's being transferred to. So make sure that they are changing their gloves frequently. I mentioned this early on, and I just want to reiterate it, is that Virginia Farmers Markets have canceled all special events and programming. That includes pop programming, food and cooking demos, music, etc. Farmers markets are for essential sales only. The other thing that you must know that is very different is that there is no sampling at all at a farmer's market. So as much as I love going to the market and getting my sausage biscuit, you can get it, you can pre-order it, and you can take it out. There's no sampling and there's no eating at the market. You're not going to go and get your bubble tea and stand there and drink it in line while you're waiting on your stuff. There's no food consumption at all at the market, and there's no sampling at all. In order to also keep things as hygienic as possible and to have that no high touch for items, get rid of condiment bottles, push pumps, silverware, cup lids, etc. at all vendor booths and the information tables. And you can consider, and I know that this is difficult, but you can consider having vendors have food washing stations at their booths. And if that can't happen, which I know that's problematic, at least have wipes and or have hand sanitizer on our website, because hand sanitizer is such a commodity it's such a rare commodity right now. There are a bunch of breweries and distilleries, here in Virginia that are making hand sanitizers that the markets have been buying by the gallons. And so there's a whole list of those on our website that are willing to provide you guys with just jugs of hand sanitizer that you can use at your market. So in addition to having it at your market manager's booth and at your SNAP booth, etc., have it also at your different vendor booths. All right. So again, other examples of no touch. So you see everything here has been cordoned off. You've got physical distancing. And what I really like is, in addition to the caution tape that we have with physical distancing, and we have the signs that are telling us that, don't touch, please tell us what it is that you want and we'll get it for you. We also have the meat guy who has put a table in front of his booth so that people can't, he has measured out what that distance is, and he's put a table to block folks to come up to his booth. You see all these folks here that have all of these prepackaged items. And then down on the bottom left-hand corner, you've got the grab-and-go box. Those have been very successful for markets during this time. So add an extra table in front of the cash boxes, setting up rope lines or other barriers in front of and around the vendor booths. Payment, no touch, easy pay. So Venmo, Apple Pay. Tell folks to, if you are going to do credit card swipes, wipe the credit cards. Have them Have them swipe it themselves, wipe the machine, wipe the square, wipe everything down. But also make sure that your vendors are rounding up. Some of the tests that have been done through some of the health organizations show that though it is not as much as us touching our face, that the virus does adhere to money and especially to metal coins. So we're telling vendors to round up whatever the cost is so that they're not giving change back. We have vendors that, and I didn't have a picture of it, and I'm sorry, I've asked folks to get me one, but like they're doing a bucket with a slit on the top for people to put the money in. So they say that, you know, your order's $25 and $25 is going into the bucket so that they're not constantly touching the money. And then they have pre-sanitized change that they're giving back. These are additional samples of folks that are practicing social distancing, have pre-ordered, have stuff pre-packaged, etc. The other thing that, yes.
We have some questions. Would you like them to wait until you're done, or you want to address them as you go?
Are they on what I've already talked about? I can address them as I go if that would be.
Are you going to talk about credit card transactions and what's the best practice on using a phone for credit card transaction?
Sure. Let me, I'm getting to that.
Okay,
right now.
I wasn't sure if that was coming up. And then would you designate someone to sanitize the hand sanitizer bottle?
Yes. So the farmers market, so one of the things that we recommend, and again, we've got a whole bunch of resources from other areas as well as the protocols we've put in place on our website. We recommend that you ask your vendors, and I know that this is difficult to do, but if you ask your vendors if they could have 2 people at their booth, would be really helpful for them. One that's handling cash and or the monetary transaction, and one that's handling the product. So if you can do that, that's highly preferred. In addition to that, every piece of equipment needs to be wiped down. So everything from your SNAP coins to all of your payment, to your Venmo, your Zelle, your Apple Pay, your Square. And so not only should the volunteers you should appoint volunteers in your market, not only to specifically focus on crowd control and making sure that people are maintaining that social distancing, but also to make sure that everything is being wiped down. And so, to go around, and I'll show you pictures of what's being done shortly regarding sanitation. But those are the key things, is that you need to make sure that you have additional volunteers. So for example, the City of Richmond Parks and Rec, not only did they mandate that there be an off-duty police officer there in uniform, but also that there were 3 Richmond City folks there that are going through as volunteers, making sure that everything is clean. And this is just a drive-through only market, but they're making sure that as the money or the credit card or whatever is coming out of the window, you know, that everything is being wiped down and is being cleaned. So make sure that you have enough volunteers in order to help you with that. A lot of markets are using and I know that folks don't have money, but there is a surplus of people that are available to work right now, even if you can do something from all of the laid off restaurant workers, et cetera, and those that have been laid off from a lot of the retail organizations. So it's a little bit easier to find folks to come out and work with you. Again, we want to minimize and eliminate shoppers' ability to touch the products they're not buying. We do not want customers to handle any items at a vendor's table. Instead, we want them to just point at whatever it is they want and let the vendors bag their purchases, and not to use reusable shopping bags. We want stuff to be brought in bags that can be thrown away, not the cloth bags. I mean, this is an entirely new world. Market manager will provide vendors with signage informing customers of this policy. All displays should be made of materials that can be sanitized frequently throughout the market. So again, going back to all of those amazing seminars and webinars we were doing with VSU on table design, we need to get rid of all cloth tablecloths, no festive table coverings, all the farmy wooden boxes, charming wicker baskets, etc. So this picture down here where she has all of this produce in the wicker basket, the wicker baskets need to go because they're absorbent. And so as are boxes, everything needs to be stuff that can be wiped down and can be disposed. And it needs to be wiped down continuously. Not only do you need to have that established with your vendors, that they are continually wiping stuff down, but you as your market manager and your volunteers need to do that. Contactless pay options are easy and convenient. I've talked about this a couple of times. But if you're doing pre-orders, they've already paid. It's where you're on site that you need to have Venmo and Zelle and Apple Pay set up and look at other options for people that are paying cash. But we are actively asking folks to advertise not bringing in cash if at all possible. We have some markets down in Southwest Virginia, down in the Marion, Independence, Abington area, where you've got an older community and they're used to paying with cash. And so they have folks that, it goes into a bucket and everything is wiped down and sprayed with Lysol and shaken around, and everything is not handled by any consumer at the market that goes in that bucket. It's all dealt with afterwards. Add signage about what you're doing and how much you appreciate your customers, and let them know, again, not to touch anything in your booth. And if possible, have your volunteers stop by your vendor booths to relieve them so that they can leave and wash their hands at the hand washing stations also. So this is an example, and Meredith is going to talk about how you can utilize SNAP and EBT at a farmer's market. But this is one of the vendor booths that actually has this plastic protective covering in front of them. They've got all of the signage in front. This is where they're doing SNAP EBT. So general cleaning, you want to do a thorough sanitation of all market equipment prior to the market. You want to clean and disinfect all high-touch surfaces such as tabletops, cash register counters, restroom fixtures, hand washing sinks, trash cans frequently, multiple times an hour. Follow the CDC guidelines. Market managers will wipe down commonly used services such as market information table, EBT redemption devices, phones, card swipers, and have hand sanitizer available. Minimize the use of smartphones while at the market and clean the smartphones and all market devices, the EBT machines, etc. Use the Environmental Protection Agency registered product that cleans and removes germs and disinfects and kills germs. I think we've heard that 70% alcohol is the latest that we've seen. Always follow the instructions on labels of the cleaning products. And if you're an indoor market, make sure that you've got enough ventilation for all of the cleaning products that are being used, right? Any other questions before I jump into sanitation?
Yeah. For pre-orders, does the individual select the food on the table when they see their name? I'm trying to visualize this, not having been to a market yet.
So folks are doing a variety of different things. So pre-order, you either drive up in your car. We saw pictures early on of Charlottesville where we had a car pull up and they had a table that had all of the people's names on placards that were coming through the market. So when they came through the entrance, if you're doing a drive-through, they gave them that placard with their name on it, and they put that in the windshield and then go drive through. At South of the James, you put your name and the windshield of your car. I think the same at O'Connor Brewing and some of these other markets that are doing just strictly drive-through curbside pickup. I'm going to pick up a curbside order down at Petersburg on Saturday, and I have to physically, I go to the market manager booth and they will give me, I give them my name and they will give me my order. So, so that's one way that you can do it. The markets that have, like South of the James, you go to each vendor. So you actually drive through this parking lot, and as you do at Charlottesville, and you go to each vendor where you've placed an order and you give them your name and they pull the bag and hand that to you. So again, all of the markets are doing everything they can to take it down to one touch, which is entirely different than a grocery store where you've got so many people that are touching your foods and your products before you get them.
Where they put it on a table, not
they put it on a table
and then step back and you go up and get it, is what I've seen at some markets.
Right. And so, and you've got a lot of different things. So you've got the markets where they've got a sampling of, you know, the 5 or 6 or 7 different items that they have, and you go up and you say, I want a bag of carrots, and they've got a price list, you know, a bag of carrots, $5. I want a bag of carrots. I want a bag of bok choy. And you point to it. Those that have, and it would be preferable, those that have the stuff out that's prepackaged and it's all sitting out on the front table, I would prefer that it just be a item on the front table and all of your back stock be behind you so that people don't have the inclination to touch or to grab. I want the market managers excuse me, I want the producers to be the ones to take it and hand it over to the market manager, or to take it and set it on the table and let that, the consumer, let me back up. I want the consumer to come up and say, I want a bag of bok choy. And then I want the producer to reach back and get the bag of prepackaged bok choy and set it on the table and let the customer pick it up, so that we're limiting the touch, et cetera. But I'm happy to talk through that more with markets and connect you with some that are successfully doing this. There's a lot of different models that are out there, but all of the models have pretty much drilled it down to one touch, if at all possible.
And we have a webinar coming up that Kim will talk about later that goes into depth on pre-orders and the various ways to do that.
Yes.
One other, well, it's not a question, but a note. Aisha says, the reusable bags have not been proven to be a link, and she provides a link there.
Okay.
So we'll check that out and add that to our resources. What about where you can't do a drive-through? And I think that's another question.
Right. So you can do a couple of different things. You can do curbside pickup, and or you can do on-site. So there are areas where you just cannot do drive-through. And we have markets that are doing a couple of different things. So Leesburg, for example, cannot be a drive-through. So they have the market set up. They were originally just doing curbside, and now they're doing on-site also. They're only letting a certain number of people in the market at a time, and they're controlling the entrance and the exit. And so markets are doing one of a couple of things. Either you pre-register to go in. Some of the markets are allocating specific times for folks, and they have them pre-register as to when they're coming to the market. And then they keep the rest of them in their cars in the parking lot. You don't want them out there congregating in the parking lot waiting to go into the market either. And so if you're going to have a line, you want that line to make sure that they have the separation in the line waiting to go in the market. If you have the ability to have them pre-register so that you can send them a text, Leesburg was sending texts and calling people going, okay, it's time for you, Kim Hutchinson, to come into the market at this time. Down in Petersburg, the market is not, I will be getting out of my car and going to the market manager's tent to pick up my stuff, but they also will have vendors that were not on the pre-order that I can go to also while I'm there. So you're only letting in a certain number of people at any given time into the market if you're not doing drive-through. You do not have to do drive-through. You do not have to do pre-orders. What you do have to do, absolutely, is you have to practice social distancing 10 feet around the vendors in the 360, 6 feet around each customer. And only you have to look at, again, how many people are in the market, how many of your vendors are in the market, et cetera, and then figure out how many customers you can allow to come into that market at any given time in order to keep that social distancing there, whether it's 30 or 50. And they don't publicize that number per se, but y'all keep track of, here's how many people we can have come in at any given time. You lock down all entry and exit points, but one or two, one entrance, one exit, or one that's both. And if you're doing one that's both, make sure you've got literally a cone or something, or a stand with rope on it going down the middle, so there's 6 feet separating the people that are coming in and going at a minimum. And focus on, social distancing and no touch. So if you cannot do curbside, if you cannot do drive-through, that's okay. You can still have a market. What you have to figure out is how many vendors you can have utilizing social distancing and no congregation, and then how many consumers you can have in your market shopping at that time. And you've got to have staff to be able to patrol that. And you've got to be comfortable being friendly about it, but being able to go up and tell somebody if they are too chummy with somebody else, or they run into a neighbor, that you've got to adhere to 6 feet. This is not socializing. The other thing that you really need to emphasize, and you need to put this on your signage, is that you want people to come in and to leave. You want them to come in and buy and leave. So you saw in even the curbside pickup where they had, 15 minutes only or 30 minutes only. And really, depending on the size, you don't want them there, but so long. I see a lot of questions coming in. Do you want me to move on and continue talking about all the samples of the hand sanitation, et cetera? or are there other questions that you need me to answer right now?
Well, there's a number that have come up on what you've been talking about. Just a clarification. To be clear, are you saying the customer may not bring in their reusable bags to fill with all the orders they are picking up? Or are you saying the vendor shouldn't bring their products into the market in reusable bags?
Vendors should not be bringing products into the market in reusable bags for sure. They should be bringing things in that things that are non-porous. So I'm not saying, regarding reusable bags, I am not saying that people cannot use them. It has been recommended through the state agencies, and this may have been earlier information that came down from the CDC or wasn't proven, but the preference is that reusable bags not be utilized at this time in the state of Virginia. We are not going to be shutting people down for using them, but the preference is that reusable bags not be used at this time. And for producers coming in, they're using products that can, and I'm sure bags can be washed, et cetera, but they're using things that can be wiped down that aren't as porous continuously to bring the products in. So making sure that things stay sterile. What has been established is not carved in stone as the end all be all. If you come up with something different, then let me know, and I will be glad to run that by state agencies to see if that is something that adheres to what they have deemed appropriate through whether it's Department of Health or Department of Agriculture or the governor's office. A lot or a good portion of what we've put together has literally been market managers reaching out to me and going, okay, this just is not going to work in my community. I'm in a very congested area in Northern Virginia. I can't do drive-through. I am down in Southwest Virginia, and I absolutely cannot, do online pre-order because I have an older population of producers that only pay with cash. What can I do? And the response was, well, you tell me what you see based on social distancing, no congregation, and no touch working in your market. And you put that plan together, and then we will put that in front of officials, and they will determine whether that aligns with Executive Order 53 and 55 in their eyes, and give you either the yes or have you thought about this. So a lot of what these protocols that have been put in place, we started with basic protocols that we pulled in my working with Department of Health and Department of Agriculture over the weekend of the 12th of March before the March 17th order came out. And then all of this expanded based on you as market managers telling me, this just does not work for my market or my community, or have you thought of this? And that's how we were able to expand this as long as we adhere to those three core areas, okay? So hand sanitizer needs to be ubiquitous throughout the markets. As it needs to be very visible, you need to have, it needs to be very accessible. And there's all different types of stations that are out there. Everything from, the water jugs to one of the markets in Nova actually hooked up a sink, which I thought was cool. But if you don't have hand washing stations, then you need to have some type of hand sanitizer that's out there. It doesn't have to be a hand washing station, but you do need to have cleaning stations, and you need to have it very visible and publicized, okay? You want somebody to be monitoring this. And if you have a larger market, you want to appoint somebody to be overseeing the hand sanitizing and sanitation. For those of you that are taking SNAP tokens and stuff, and Meredith can talk a little bit more about this, but like Blacksburg, they pre-sanitized all of the tokens and put them in little baggies that were sanitized and used gloves that they continuously changed, et cetera. There are several different models out there as to how to use tokens if you have to use tokens. But anyway, the main thing is we want to be very visible that we are doing everything within our power to eliminate germs being passed, okay? You also want to make sure that you've got no touch waistbands waste bins and antiseptic rubs in the shoppers areas. If you don't have, a lot of markets don't have bathrooms, et cetera. So even if you do have bathrooms at your facility and they are open, you need to make sure that if y'all are in charge of them, if they don't have staff, whoever it is, the city or the parks doesn't have staff, they're making sure that those stay sanitized. And you have those open during your market, you need to make sure that they're being sanitized. Signage is key. You've got to have a lot of different signage that's out there, both at the entrance, around social congregating. It needs to be visible. It needs to be visual. It needs to be very clear. And we've got lots of great examples of different types of signage that is out there. These are examples of some of the signage that's been done. Here's one from the Napa Farmers Market that actually did it in both English and Spanish. And here's some other examples of signage, et cetera. And then we've got a great sign that came out of the Cooperative Extension of Virginia Tech on our website that you can also download and laminate and use at your market. Some of the markets, this is actually for social distancing. These are a couple of markets. This is a market somewhere else in the country. And I thought this was really interesting where they actually spray painted, you know, the circles 6 feet apart and have, you know, they were able to do this in the parking lot. My Walgreens has done this. They've spray painted lines all over the floor of the Walgreens. So if you have the capacity to do this, just make it very visible. Another visual of folks keeping 6 feet apart. This is one of the Nova farmers markets, how they have cordoned off and used cones and tape in order to, in a very congested area, in order to be able to adhere to social distancing as a vendor. So again, 6 feet for consumers and 10 feet for vendors. Here are some examples of social media and website communication that you can utilize, everything from following the guidelines to how to pay to you know, social distancing, don't touch products, etc. If you as a market manager can make signs and provide those to your vendors or put those up on the vendor booths and laminate them, that would be a huge help to the vendors. So I was having all of these communications with the Department of Agriculture, with Secretary Ring and with Commissioner Brana and the governor's office, and they were putting things in writing and I was publicizing them. Y'all were asking me questions about how to organize your market, how to do this, how to do that, does this work for me, etc. And they would email me and then I would share that email. And so I asked them, I'm like, could you please put together, in addition to the official guidance that you have on your website, can you please, under cover of your authority agency, put together all of these frequently asked questions that we're getting, because there's mass confusion out in the community as to what can be done and what cannot be done. As well as we were still seeing, as of last week, these social media posts saying farmers markets in Virginia are closed. They're not deemed essential. Well, yes, they're not deemed essential, but they are not closed, nor have they been closed. And so they did. The Department of Agriculture put out, it's on their website, it's on our website, FAQs that address the key issues that are of greatest concern to those that aren't entrenched in this issue like we are, that you can utilize with your municipalities, et cetera. The first and foremost, are farmers markets allowed to operate during COVID-19 emergency? Yes, they are. Farmers markets may continue to operate, but do so under the guidance of VDEC as put together to establish proper social distancing, promoting hygiene and sanitation, and eliminating congregation points. That is what they have said. That is on our website, and you are welcome to utilize those documents. And their guidance adheres to the guidances and social protocols that we put in place. The second, is pre-ordering from market vendors required? No, it is not required. While guidance to farmers markets suggests using a pre-ordering system when possible, this is not required. For markets where customers are unable to pre-order, consider establishing an on-site process for taking orders that does not involve customers browsing from vendor to vendor. You do not want them to browse. Thus, the market boards, the going in and looking at what's available before they come into market. Some markets are providing curbside pickup where possible to allow customers to remain in their vehicles. Others are limiting the number of types of vendors and taking strict steps to comply with social distancing guidelines. There are also markets that are promoting no-touch or low-touch purchasing opportunities by pre-boxing or pre-bagging food items so that customers can just grab them and go. Some markets have established one-way only foot traffic or car traffic to eliminating browsing or congregating. The third most frequently asked question, are farmers markets limited to only 10 patrons at a time? No. The guidance provided by VDEX does not limit the total number of patrons at a farmers market to 10. However, in some instances, such as a limit could create a bottleneck in congregation points outside of a market, such as patrons queuing to get in. The physical setup and layout of each market is different. Back to what I said earlier, your market needs to look at this as a math problem. How many vendors do you have adhering to that 10-foot radius? How big a space do you have to fit that number of vendors in? And then how many customers can you bring in if each customer is adhering to 6 feet? If that ends up being 10 customers or 8 customers at a time, that's what it is. If it ends up being 100 customers at a time where you have one person at a booth and one person standing at a line, that's what it is. It's based on your space and adhering to the social distancing parameters that have been put out there while having one person, one customer at a booth at a time. Each market should be set up in a manner that allows all individuals to adhere to social distancing guidelines promoted by the Department of Health, Virginia Department of Health, and the Center for Disease Control. Markets should arrange vendors in a manner that promotes adequate social distancing and eliminates customer browsing and congregation points. The last question, is there a calculation for the number of patrons that can be within a market at any given time? There is no calculation, and this goes back to, again, the math problem. You have to look at what your market configuration needs to take into account the most recent social distancing guidelines that were issued by VDH and the CDC. You have to ensure proper social distancing. Market managers should account for the total physical area available, the shape or layout of the market, the number of vendors present, the types of stands used by vendors. So you have vendors, you might have vendors that have one stand. You might have vendors that have 3 tents because they're a huge meat vendor or produce vendor or whatever. So that's, you know, you got to take into account 10 feet around that 3 tent vendor too. You have customers, you have to look at flow patterns and other factors. As stated previously, markets should arrange vendors in a manner that promotes adequate social distancing and eliminates customer browsing and congregation points. I know I've said this 500 times, but this is the key piece. You've got to make sure that your markets are requiring 10 feet of space between vendor stands. Market managers should continually monitor patrons to ensure they are maintaining proper social distancing of 6 feet apart between one another. Okay. So additional information that has come up that I thought I would share. I had somebody reach out and say, well, what about cottage food products? So because we're doing online, and right now, or the way it was pre-COVID-19, you couldn't sell cottage food products through an online platform. So an exception has been made, and this is from Pam Miles, who's the food safety manager, the head of food safety for VDEX here in the state. Only if products are being picked up at a farmer's market. If you are using pre-ordering, so you're using whatever pre-ordering line platform you have, and you have a cottage food product, but that product is going to be picked up at the farmer's market, then it can be a cottage food product. It must be labeled, and all that information is on VDEX website. That's the same. And this is only a COVID-19 exception. So if you have a cottage food product, you can list it for sale on your online market platform. However, that product has to be picked up at your farmer's market. So through curbside or however you're setting it up for products to be picked up. The other issue that has come up is obviously VDEX is not doing inspections right now. And so when we look at products that have not been inspected for a market, I've had folks reach out and say, okay, I've got low risk products, what do I do? And I don't have access to a certified kitchen. So if they don't have access to a certified kitchen, or using something like Frontier Kitchen or Chicken Egg or Hatch or any of these certified kitchens that are out there, the vendor producer can go ahead and they can go through the process, the paperwork process and all of that is online. And this is only applicable for COVID-19 and a low risk product. But they can go through that process, get all their ducks in a row, et cetera. And then Pam Miles' department, VDEX, will do a virtual inspection. They will do a web-based inspection of your product in order to get you up to be able to sell it at the market, okay? These will go back to post-COVID-19. We'll be going back to the way things are. So this is a picture of COVID-19 Virginia farmers markets. We see, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Meredith has to leave at 1:30, so if we can move her up a little in the
Sure.
process. Yeah, we're just running a little late.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm almost done. And we can move her up next. That would be fine. This is a picture of COVID-19 farmers markets here in Virginia right now. We've got, these are Charlottesville and Nova, Virginia, and Southwest Virginia right now. So we've got folks that have done pre-order where their bags are on the table with their name on them. The person comes up to the bottom slide, the top slide, left slide, the bottom slide is the car pulls up to the booth and gives them their name. It's on a placard in their car, and they take the prepackaged item and they put it into the back of the car. You see the line of the cars coming in for the Charlottesville Farmers Market, drive-through farmers market. Here's a picture of the market staff actually putting the product in the car. You see folks are using screening, et cetera. It's a different day at a farmer's market now. As Mary mentioned earlier, because of the fact that we really wanted to get the specific information out to you in Virginia, this has been a big overview, and we've got several other speakers that have highly relevant information to address today, and I thank you all for being here. But in addition to this, we need to really drill down on specific issues, because these are the calls and the emails that I get every day on how do we handle pre-orders? What are the software that's out there? What's working, what's not? What's producer friendly? What's market manager friendly? How are we handling market managed online sales? How are we, how are we handling this new business model? We have participated, myself and my cohorts here at VAFMA have participated in a lot of different webinars around the state and around the country, looking at what's being done. And it's been very topical information. Some has been good. We've been lucky if we've participated in a 2-hour webinar and we've pulled one product out. Some of them have been basically sales calls for a specific product. That is not what these are. These are the specifics of what you need, especially the online platform, which is new to a lot of you. It's going to look at all the different platforms that are, not all of them, but a majority of the ones that are being used here in Virginia. The market managers will be talking about the pros and the cons. We'll be giving tips on how to be able to set it up and operate. We are not advocating for one over the other. We're telling you what's being used effectively, where the glitches are, some of the little behind the scenes tricks that you can use to get going. And we will be eliminating any of the misconceptions that are out there about the online platforms, as well as doing a hardcore drill down on pre-order sales. So I encourage you to participate in these webinars. The link is here. It will be sent out to you after the call. As well as this is the link to our COVID-19 page. Do you want me to, I'm done. Do you want me to answer any other questions, or should we go ahead and let Meredith go and then I can answer questions afterwards?
Yeah, let's let Meredith go and then we'll come back. And there's a number of questions that we can get to.
Perfect. So I unshared my screen so that Meredith can load her presentation. Phew, that was a lot of information. I hope that was helpful.
Meredith, I've unmuted you. There she is.
Hi, sorry. Hi. All right. Going to the top. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really fun to be here. Sorry that this is how we're meeting each other. Hi, I'm Meredith Ledlie Johnson. I work for Virginia Cooperative Extension's Family Nutrition Program. I'm also the secretary of the Virginia Farmers Market Association for like 5 years now. So been around, seen it, a lot of things happen. Very proud of our farmers markets here in Virginia for stepping up to feed our communities. You guys are an integral link in the chain, and I appreciate all your hard work, and I've been just floored by your ingenuity. Just every week, things change and you step up. So just to orient us, some common issues, some common concerns that I've heard. For example, your market is moving online and you're unsure on what to do about SNAP sales. or you're unsure what to do about tokens in your market, or you want to open a pop-up market location, but your EBT machine is being used at your main site at that time, or it's just being used somewhere else, or you just feel overwhelmed by thinking of SNAP and farmers markets and COVID-19. So some basic information. There's just a huge surge in the SNAP caseload right now. I think this past week it went up 500% in Virginia, and it's probably only going to increase considering the 22 million people who applied for insurance last week. So I want you to be prepared for that as farmers markets, especially that many of these people are new to the system. They have not had SNAP before, or they might not have had friends have had SNAP before, so they don't know the ins and outs of it. At this time, SNAP cannot be used. I'm sorry, and I don't mean to think that you know what I'm talking about. SNAP is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and that is what we used to call food stamps. So at this time, SNAP cannot be used to pay online for food in Virginia. I do want you to know the good news is that Virginia is looking for a waiver for that, along with other states, but that is a process that's going to take some time because that is brand new for the USDA to manage. So one other thing to note is that markets can apply for a second terminal from the Virginia Department of Social Services to serve new locations, like I was talking about in that previous slide about pop-up locations, or if you're running a new mobile market, or if you're running a market at a food bank or some other similar situation. You can apply for a free Department of Social Services terminal for that second location if you provide a strong reason for your need. So if you really write a good reason, they are waiving that old idea where they could only give you one terminal. And I'll have more information on where to find out about that if you look in our EBT toolkit. I'll have links to that later. Markets have found ways to use credits or holds on their online platforms to accept SNAP sales. Each online platform is a little different. I'm not going to go through step by step for each online platform, only because it's all written down in something that I link to later. But most of them use credit, so that means that the person is basically paying when they pick up in person. And so you kind of have to figure that out for each online platform a little bit differently. Some use credits, or some have a pay using SNAP EBT option when the person checks out. But in all those situations, the person pays in person when they pick up their food. As for tokens, as we were talking about earlier, so this is, again, there's a lot of choice and creativity for market managers in this time. It's really up to you and what you're comfortable with and what you're able to sustain over the coming months. So some markets are still using tokens and some are not. Recommendations that we have found are to sanitize tokens. Most people just use a sanitizing spray. And then also don't redistribute that same day the tokens that you take in that day for sales. So don't, if you're taking in tokens for sales, don't then, sell tokens or give other tokens out as change that day that you received that day. You want to take those home and sanitize them before using them. You want to pre-count your tokens. So most people count them out into denominations of 10 and hand them out in sandwich bags. Other markets I've seen have passed tokens back and forth to customers in like little strawberry baskets or things like that. Just as long as you're trying to keep the touch points down as much as you possibly can. If you do go tokenless, you want to decide what to do about tokens that customers already have, right? A lot of customers have shopped at your market before using SNAP, and there are tokens out there. So that is up to you, but I do want you to know that according to the USDA, when you applied for an FNS number, a SNAP customer must be able to ask for a refund for tokens that they have. So just keep that in mind. Some markets have turned away from tokens to instead use paper vouchers that get thrown out at the end of the day. But the number one thing about all of this, as Kim was saying, is communication. You need to make sure that your staff and your vendors all understand and then all can explain in simple language the new system that you're using. Markets participating in Virginia Fresh Match. So that is the FINI grant that we hold here in Virginia that doubles or lowers the cost of fruits and vegetables using SNAP. So they're still applying that discount to eligible foods, which is fruits and vegetables. The statewide limit on Virginia Fresh Match discount has been lifted, but markets may choose to maintain one. So there used to be a limit, but that is no longer in place. But some markets are choosing to still have a Virginia Fresh Match limit. Some markets are creating grab-and-go boxes of aggregated produce for SNAP shoppers. Some SNAP shoppers aren't able to get online and order ahead of time, or some markets might use this at a curbside pickup situation or a market where you're still shopping. So the box is usually a fixed price. Try to keep it in the $10 to $20 range. And for the markets that do this, they're often participating in Virginia Fresh Match, and what they put in the box is Virginia Fresh Match eligible, which means fruits and vegetables. And it's recommended to try and to include culturally appropriate and staple items such as, you know, onions, potatoes, whatever you think is best for a family. There are a ton of resources that are being generated, and really want to be put in touch with the Virginia Fresh Match Network if you have any questions about this situation, because they're the ones that are doing an excellent job aggregating all this information and maintaining communication between markets that accept SNAP. So we've partnered with the Virginia Fresh Match on a how-to guide for accepting SNAP. It's linked to right here, and we can also put the exact link in your email that goes out. But when you get the slides, you can click on this link. It covers a variety of things, such as how to accept SNAP using online platforms, has 3 different ideas for running a tokenless market, and it also links links to resources for protecting consumers and vendors. Included is the link to the EBT toolkit, which is the toolkit I manage here in Cooperative Extension, which is just the basics of how to apply to FNS to accept SNAP, where to get information on those free EBT point of sale machines from the Department of Social Services, where to buy tokens. All of that is written up in our manual, which is in the EBT toolkit, which is linked to in this guide here at the bottom. You really want to educate yourself about this because it is constantly changing. Virginia Fresh Match Network is really the person who's doing that the best. They host a regular call for Virginia farmers markets who want to learn from each other about how to solve issues around food access, SNAP, Virginia Fresh Match, and the upcoming problems of WIC and Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program checks, which haven't been released yet, but will be shortly. We have to figure out how to deal with those as well. So if you want to join this regular call, right now it's weekly, you can email Katie at leapforlocalfood.org to join the listserv, and you'll receive those invitations. I also really enjoy that they take notes every week, and those are compiled and emailed out. And so if you miss the call, it's recorded, but then also you can go check on the notes and be like, what did that person say? And really, if you're just curious, I recommend you attend at least one call. The amount of information that's shared on them is incredibly impressive. And us here at the top aggregating all this information have a big overview, but market managers who are using a specific online platform or are running their market in a specific way can answer your detailed questions much better than I can. So it's really markets networking with other markets that answers your questions the best. So this is a really excellent resource for you to do that. You also want to consider your consumers and how you need to educate them. So you need to think about a few different aspects of that, right? Things have changed completely. The world is upside down. So you need to think about educating SNAP shoppers who have shopped at your market in the past about your new SNAP system. Whether you've chosen to go tokenless, whether you've chosen to have a drive-up situation, whatever your situation is, they need to understand it because they've shopped in your market in the past and they need to know the new way. You also then need to think about educating people who have never been on SNAP that your market is open, that it accepts SNAP, and then according to your market, if it possibly doubles SNAP. You also need to educate your vendors, your staff, your volunteers, and then please don't forget your community supporters. And by that I mean your city council, your local Department of Social Services, whoever works with the populations you need to reach, your local food bank. You need to get them easy talking points about your new SNAP system. I think especially if you double SNAP, because of all the people who are new to SNAP, they may not know that, and they really need to get that information. And then finally, as always, this is something we always need to do, but you need to think about educating customers on how to cook and enjoy local produce, or at least get them resources to do so. So in regards to that, here's the link to my program, which is a nutrition education program aimed at low-income Virginians, both youth and adults. We have SNAP-Ed funded agents. Here's a link to the map. If you are a market manager who needs some help thinking about your outreach, your marketing, what partners you need to talk to, etc., they are a wealth of knowledge with that. So I recommend you click on this link and find your local SNAP-Ed agent near you. If you're looking just for resources to share with your customers, we have recipes that are aimed at budget-friendly, low-cost, easy to make. We also have a Facebook page, a YouTube, and an Instagram that shares all that information, including videos on cooking basics and physical activity and all that good stuff. We also have new resources coming out, including videos on how to shop at a market using SNAP during COVID-19. So we'll have a few different types because there's so many different solutions. We're creating a social marketing campaign using our social media to educate SNAP shoppers that farmers markets are open. That'll be a statewide campaign. I will be creating marketing templates for markets to use and adapt. So that's these basic messages, so that if you don't have the time or the budget to create your own marketing tools, we can help you with that, specifically to market that you accept SNAP. And then if you think of something else that you as a farmer's market that accepts SNAP need, please let me know. I'm happy to work with you. And then finally, I just wanted to point you to, there is an incredible amount of COVID-19 FAQ tip sheets at Virginia Cooperative Extension's publications page. The link is at the bottom. Two of which I thought you really would want to see was one in English and Spanish is a FAQ for farmers markets. But they have one I was incredibly impressed with what they have. They have one for food banks. They have one for grocery stores. They have one for farm stands. They have one for U-Picks. So you might also want to share this with your producers as well. And then here is my information. If you ever want to get in touch with me directly, I'd be happy to help in any way that I can.
Meredith?
Yes.
What about market vouchers for seniors? How will that work with a higher risk population?
We are working with the Department of Aging on that. They haven't been distributed yet, so we haven't had to deal with it yet. So there is the link to the woman who runs that program in that guide that I pointed out, but we don't have a specific answer for that yet. So I would recommend staying on those calls, those weekly calls with the Virginia Fresh Match Network, as we work through how to solve that problem. So those checks go directly to seniors, and then they are accepted directly by vendors. And so if you're an online situation, or all the variety of different ways markets are now being run, it can be a real monkey wrench. So we don't have a solution yet, but stay tuned.
Okay, and can you place the extension service link in this chat box?
Yes,
okay.
I can. Which link exactly? The family nutrition program or the COVID-19 stuff? Probably the COVID-19 stuff, I'm thinking.
And maybe all of it.
I see how it is.
The COVID-19.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that right now.
Susan wants a copy of your PowerPoint, and we'll add that to the email along with a variety of emails. Oh, and thank you, Teresa Nartea, for adding the link.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, you should just go on that and browse it, because your jaw is going to drop about what they've been able to write. It's an incredible turnaround.
Excellent. Thank you. Kim, you can unmute yourself if you're ready.
Thank you, Meredith. I really appreciate it. We will make sure that we send out your presentation. We'll put those links up on our resource page, so make sure that you email them to me. And any questions that folks have, they can send them to Meredith directly or to myself. But Meredith and the folks at LEAP have been working tirelessly in order to be able to get markets up and running, to be able to accept SNAP. They've been working hand in hand with a lot of the pre-order online companies in order to figure out how to do that, as well as state and federal officials. So thank you for everything that you have been doing and will continue to do to support those that utilize SNAP and EBT at the farmers market. It is now my pleasure to introduce Howard Herman. He is the market manager at the Falls Church Farmers the Falls Church Farmers Market. And I started working with Howard during COVID-19 because he was experiencing some challenges with the municipalities, not necessarily or concerned about the COVID-19 parameters that were being released regarding takeout, et cetera, and trying to determine whether markets could be open and what they needed to look like. So I asked Howard if he would join us today. His market is open, and if he would share with us his experience and some of what the concerns are and what they've had to do in order to mitigate the new parameters around COVID-19 in order to operate a farmer's market. So Howard, I will turn it over to you. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Howard.
Yes, I want to start by saying or giving Kim and VAFMA a big thank you. They've been instrumental in providing information to us as we've struggled through this, as I'm sure most of you have. But want to just put in a little plug there that VAFMA is a great source of information. So if you're struggling, if you have issues that you need answers to, throw them Kim's way and her staff, and they'll, if they don't have the answer immediately, they'll ship it out to VDAX and we'll get an answer back, and you'll be able to move forward. From the Falls Church perspective, we are a 37-year-old market, and we run year-round. The winter market typically has 38 vendors, and then in the summer we kick it up to about 50. The challenge for us, having been involved with the market the entire history of the market, I always assumed that everybody got it, that farmers markets were essential. Always assumed that people looked at the market as a great source for wholesome and healthy food. Much to my surprise, I found that probably as many people thought that farmers markets were a social gathering place and really almost a special event. And that was the tough nut that we had to crack, was convincing city council and the city manager that yes, indeed, we were providing or we were an essential outlet for providing food. I was struck the first week. Actually, we only shut down 1 week. We shut down March 21st. And although truth be told, we had 3 or 4 vendors show up with pre-orders, so they were technically not there, but they were there. So anyway, but I was struck as I left the market that day and went out to the grocery stores and looked at the shelves and saw there was no meat, there was no milk, there was no bread, there were no eggs, and all of those things are available at the local farmers market. So I think going forward that one of the biggest challenges that we have to face and really address is getting that perception of farmers markets being a social gathering place, which they are, or an event, get that put a little bit in the back of things, and that we accentuate and really celebrate the fact that farmers markets provide essential food. And I just think that message has gotten lost a little bit, and we need to work on that. So from the Falls Church perspective, Um, to be honest with you, that first week we were closed, and we got right back into it on the Monday after that Saturday without a market, and started developing plans, worked with VAFMA, VDAX, and came up with a plan. And we thought we were good to go, and we were moving along. And then there was a local meeting in the Northern Virginia area of all the county and city executives, and lo and behold, the Thursday before the Saturday market on the 28th, we thought we were going to lose it again. And frankly, if we'd lost it then, I think we'd probably still be closed. But the key for us was to be able to come up with a plan that eliminated all the things that Kim has talked about, the gathering, the congregation points, maintaining social distancing, and all of those were just critical. Now, a lot of the markets in Northern Virginia have adapted policies where an individual can come to the farmer's market not having placed a pre-order and still shop. Falls Church, the first Saturday that we were open, we were strictly pre-order only, and no shopping. That, as it turns out, was probably not as necessary. And we moved forward the following week, the second week, with allowing some shopping. So our website, our information we put out, all our publicity says pre-order only, or pre-order and or delivery only. But then we do allow, for instance, if a customer comes in, they've placed a pre-order with an orchard, they get up to that table, they've got their bag, they grab it, and then they see there's something else on the table that draws their interest. We do allow a prepackaged bag of, for instance, of apples that weren't pre-ordered. If they're there, the vendor has them, we allow that sale to take place. So in essence, we're requiring most business be pre-order or delivery, with some, again, scaled down version of being able to go into the market and buy something that you did not pre-order. So biggest challenges for us going forward is space. Used to be, as I'm sure everybody experienced in the past, your vendor tents were one after another, touching each other. So we had to establish the 10-foot minimum. We actually have 10 to 15 feet. We're shooting for 15 feet as much as we can. But when you do that, you decrease the amount of size you have for your farmer's market. We had, like I said, we had 38 vendors signed up for our winter market. We last week had 18 show, and we've got 50 signed up for our regular season market, and that starts May 2nd. Right now, I've only got 25 committed to attend that. So the attrition that has occurred with the pre-order requirement, and the fact that some farmers, quite frankly, are just scared to come to the market. They don't want to have, they want to expose themselves or their employees or family members to the virus. So they've chosen to stay away. So going back again also to a little bit of what Kim said, we did have a farmer last week that said it was the best Saturday they had all winter. And another one accepted over 175 pre-orders. So as customers learn that the pre-order system is available and that it works and you get in and you get out, they're going to take advantage of it. It's a lot safer than going to a grocery store, handling a cart that somebody else has just handled. It's not been sanitized. So the fact that the customer can come in, quickly grab what they pre-ordered and get out, actually, in my view, makes it a desirable program and system of way of operating. So anyway, that's really about it from the Falls Church end of things. We look forward to the start of the summer market, and frankly, we're telling our customers and our vendors that this is not going to be a short-term situation. We don't anticipate going back to quote unquote normal this season, but we'll see what time brings.
Thank you, Howard. I really appreciate it. Y'all have worked so hard in order to get your market up and running, and I am so thrilled to hear the success stories coming out of your market. So please keep us abreast of what's happening. And just to reiterate, I have seen the question several times in the chat, and to reiterate what Howard has said, every conversation that I've had with the governor, they have stated that this is the way that it's going to be through the fall. Here in Virginia, that we're not expected to peak. I think they're now aligning with the models that are coming out of UVA, that we're not expected to peak until late summer, early fall. So this is this market season. But I also will say that the Department of Agriculture is very pleased with the different models that are out there, and they actually are doing visits to markets that are utilizing these innovative approaches, like what Tracy Fry is doing down in Williamsburg and what is being done up in Charlottesville, et cetera, as well as all around the state. And their expectation is that even when we come out of COVID-19, that we still are going to be able to utilize some aspects of this, especially with the pre-ordering and the online ordering. So even when we do come out of COVID-19, I think that we're going to see an entirely different farmers market moving forward. But anyway, enough of me being on my bandwagon. It is now my pleasure to introduce Riko Metzroth. Riko is the head of Farmers Insurance. He is not only the agent for the Virginia Farmers Market Association, but he is a great friend of the markets around the state. He is the specialist in all different types of insurance. That he is our go-to guy for anything that has to do with general liability or liability insurance as it relates to farmers markets insurance. But he also is a highly skilled financial advisor and financial agent. So I've asked him, as I had shared, to speak on general liability as well as the different financial opportunities that are out there with the loans. So I'm now going to turn it over to Riko Metzroth, and I will say, while he's unmuting himself, that he is very open and accessible. So any technological questions that you have regarding insurance or what he presents regarding finances, please email him and he will be happy to work with you on that information. Riko?
Okay, I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Just to clarify, I used to be the state vice president for farmers until I went into private practice 7 years ago. So now I have, my agency and office here in Richmond, but I have licenses in 10 states. So I'm up in Fairfax County quite a bit, DC. I have grandchildren up in the district, and so know the state very well. Even know that there's 2 Bristols, one in Tennessee and one in Virginia. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was a couple of things. First of all, I'm a small business owner like yourself. I have 3 employees and I have some contractors that work for me. So I was very much interested in the 2 types of loans that were out there. So I thought I'd share with you my experience and also how to apply for these loans. And oh, by the way, since I'm always looking at CNBC, watching the markets all day, I see that the loan program has run out on the first tranche. So hopefully Congress will reconvene. I'm not sure why they're out on break right now. I think it's irresponsible on their part, but that's just my opinion. To double the amount of money that's available. We were speaking earlier today, there's really 2 different types of ways that you can get the loans in terms of the PayPal protection program. So that's one of the loans. The first one is to go through your current bank, and they will help you navigate the loan process and actually help you process the loan. But I'm hearing more and more anecdotes about how the local banks even if you don't have an account, have been stepping up for people, throughout the Commonwealth here. So I think it's good if you have a business account or even a personal account with your own bank. I would try them first. I've heard good things, for example, about BB&T and SunTrust. I run my business accounts through BB&T. They've been great. I've heard that Wells Fargo and Bank of America are simply overwhelmed and not be able to keep up at this point. So let's talk about this PayPal protection program. And I've gotten some pre-questions from Mary there, and you can be a sole proprietor, you can have a small LLC, you can have just one, you can be an S Corp, you can have just one employee, you can have 3 employees. It doesn't matter as long as you are in business, I believe, as of 2/15 of 2020. All right. By the way, I've given Mary a couple of documents that you can look up on the Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Chamber of Commerce website regarding the 2 different kinds of loans, and I would encourage you to do that. But Mary has those, and I've actually highlighted them for my own benefit. So hopefully those same highlighted passages will help you folks as well if you want to get copies from Mary. The way the PayPal, you were talking about PayPal before. The way that the payroll protection program works is it's intended to keep as many people employed as possible, and by the government through the underwriting of the banks can provide the funds to the small employers. That's how we can keep folks on payroll in this country. A tremendously large percentage of employees in this country are actually employed by small businesses. So I think it's a wonderful program, and I'm surprised and amazed and pleased at how not only the Fed has stepped up, because they have done a remarkable job, the Department of Treasury, and as well as Congress, working with Executive Office have done this first tranche. But the Fed in particular has really stepped up and provided a lot of guidance and a lot of liquidity for Americans, and particularly for small business owners. So the way the PayPal protection program works is that you can receive essentially it's a 2-month program, or they look at it in terms of 2 months, 2.5 times your monthly payroll. So what you need to do is, if folks know what a 941 quarterly payroll report is, the annual version of that is called a 940. But the 941 quarterly payroll report is either done by you or by your accountant, and it not only tracks the number of employees that you have, but also the amount of payroll that you have provided them. Also keeps tracks of both federal and the state income taxes that you've collected and had to pay on behalf of your employees. And don't forget, you're submitting money yourself as an employer. Here's an important point I want everybody to write down, that the definition of payroll expenses also includes health insurance premiums. So I provide that for my employees. So that health insurance premium combined with the actual payroll and FICA and all that other stuff that I pay out goes into the computation for how much of a loan that you person is qualified for. And just to put it in perspective, my insurance and financial services practice with 3 employees and a couple of contractors, it qualified for a $37,000 loan. Just to put it in perspective. All right, so these loans are actually forgivable if, in fact, you maintain both the number of employees as well as the amount of payroll expenses that you have been dishing out. That's changed a couple of times. Every once in a while I get an email about how the rules are changing. It used to be that you just had to maintain the amount of payroll expenses, but now they're looking for you to maintain the number of payroll employees. So that's if it's going to be 100%. forgivable. You can also go to a pro rata version of that. If you're not able to keep all your employees, you're not able to maintain payroll expenditure to the same level, they will do a pro rata portion of that as being forgivable. The interest rate for businesses is 3.75%. For nonprofits, it's 2.75%. Again, I want to stress I'm talking about the oh, wait a minute, you know what? I leaked over into the other program. Let me back up. So the Payroll Protection Program has a 1% interest rate, and those loan payments will be deferred for 6 months. If you use the money for anything other than payroll, then you'll have up to 2 years to pay it. All right. So that's the Payroll Protection Program. I don't know if there's any questions on that now, but let me go over to the other section now, which is the EIDL. You may have heard of that, and that stands for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. You can find that one on SBA.gov, by the way. One thing I would caution you on is that you're actually filling out 2 loan applications. The one that you get on SBA.gov is actually an application, and then once you finish that, and it's about 15 minutes, you'll actually get a screen that pops up with a confirmation number. Make sure you do a screenshot of that confirmation number. Back to the Payroll Protection Program, you're actually completing that through a bank, through a financial institution. It can be a little confusing because there's a version of that application online, the PPP as they call it, but it's not actually an application. It's more of a sample document. Some people have filled that out and they're waiting for their loans, and they actually never met with the banks on that. So back to the EIDL, which is directly from the SBA. The EIDL, you know, the big advertisement on it originally was that you could get an emergency grant of $10,000, which would be forgiven. Unfortunately, I just got an email yesterday or 2 days ago that my $10,000 grant was going to be lowered to $3,000, and then they're just telling me what the rules are because I haven't been funded yet, because I only have 3 employees. So the rule is it's been changed from a flat $10,000 for anybody who applies to a maximum of $1,000 per employee. Again, for those, you know, here's the eligibility requirement for the EIDL loan. Businesses with fewer than 500 employees. You had to be in existence for this loan as of 1/31, by the way. Co-ops, ESOPs, that's employee stock ownership plans. Tribal small businesses, also with fewer than 100 employees. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, and most private nonprofits. You'll have to dig in a little deeper in the SBA website for that last definition. All right. The loan on this, the interest rate on this loan is, I started saying this before, 3.75% for businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits. The payments on the coronavirus EIDL loan are deferred for 1 year. You can get up to $200,000 without a personal guarantee. An approval can be based on credit score, and no first-year tax returns are required. So in other words, you can have been a startup as of January 31st. The point here is that if you recall the Payroll Protection Program, that was all based on payroll expenses, right? This one, the EIDL, is based on rent or any other expenses, you know, besides the payroll. The one thing I'll tell you is, I think I mentioned it a second ago, I applied for these on the SBA one. I did almost 2 weeks ago. I think I did that one on a Sunday, and then I got all my paperwork done with BB&T for my Payroll Protection Program last Thursday, and I haven't heard anything yet in terms of loan approvals. BB&T asked me once for some more documents, and it's an amazing amount of documents that they required. I think when the federal government, Congress, the Fed, and the executive branch all get together, they really wanted this thing to be streamlined. You may have heard in the media that the banks are really underwriting these as if they're normal loans, and I'm here to tell you that's probably what's happening. I don't think that's being done in the spirit of the program, but it is what it is. Keep in mind that the federal government is asking these banks to use their own money to front the loans and then to be reimbursed by the Fed or by the U.S. Treasury. Okay. All right. So why don't we stop here before I go into the other coronavirus thing? Any questions on either of these two loans? All right. I do believe that
I have a
Congress
question.
is. Oh, yeah, I was just going to say,
Sorry.
I'm pretty sure they'll be doubling the amount once Congress comes back to session. But go ahead. What's your question?
Can you talk about those who, as employees, that qualify for the loans? Do they have to be paid as of January 1? Can they be contractors? Do they have to be full-time, part-time employees? Can you go over that a little bit for the payroll loans?
Yeah. So you're talking about the employees essentially getting the benefit, right?
Yes.
So they can stay on the payroll.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if they're part-time or full-time, for example. So if somebody was on salary and they, if they can continue to stay on the payroll, these funds can be used to keep them on payroll. Doesn't necessarily mean that the individual is going to be maintained at that same level or say number of hours, part-time, full-time, but it certainly behooves the small business owner to maintain that level of payroll for every employee, because the more that he or she does that, the more that the loan is forgiven. Does that answer your question?
But they have to be actual employees, not contractors, not 1099 contractors, right? And they also have to have been on the payroll or been paid they had to have been paid in January.
Well, so the January date was the business had to be in business by that time. The payroll date is measured by March 31st. So I can only answer it in my case.
Okay.
The contractors that I have, that are paid commission instead of salary, and those people are counted towards my payroll calculation, for IRS purposes, the 941 report purposes. So yes, if I maintain their income, then yes, they would qualify for that. But that's truly up to the individual. All of this is up to the individual employer. All right. Any other questions? So big websites for everybody to check out is sba.gov, and then I would go to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce website, and then Google is out there for EIDL. I think that's a good thing to Google, and you'll find out a lot more. But definitely talk to your local bank that you're doing business with now. A lot of people think it's maybe too late to apply. Obviously, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this, but first come, first serve. That's how I know that my bank is handling the applications. So the sooner that you apply, the better. All right. The other topic I wanted to talk to you about was, I'm getting this a lot because I insure a lot of restaurants and delis and things like that, and they've not been allowed to stay open. But I have other businesses that I also insure, like exercise types of businesses and others where folks are, have congregated, so to speak. Let me start out this way. So every insurance policy in the property and casualty insurance world really is made up of two different types of wording. The first one is covered losses or covered perils. The other one is exclusions, right? So Even if you see a policy out there that's all risk, you know, they may call it all risk, or maybe the insurance department has allowed it to be called all risk. That tells you that it's a broader policy than something that's strictly named perils, but even an all risk policy has exclusions in it. So a key phrase that you find in any property and casualty policy is covered cause of loss. Some parts of the contract might say covered peril, all right? And that'll describe exactly what is covered, but whether it's coverage for your, let's just talk about a restaurant, or, you know, whether it's covered for the contents, you know, the kitchen, you know, slip and fall liability cases, things like that. It has to be literally in there as a covered cause of loss. So examples would be, you know, fire, smoke, again, slip and fall, lawsuit, contamination of the food and it has made somebody ill. Those are all covered perils. But I'm going to read to you now 5 very typical exclusions you're going to find in a commercial insurance policy. Policy exclusions that would affect coverage include, but are not limited to, governmental action exclusions, seizure or destruction of property by the order of government authority, ordinance or law, in other words, regulating the use of the business or the location. There's a specific bacteria exclusion, a specific virus or bacteria exclusion as well. And then you may have heard about one for riot and civil commotion, things like that. So, by the way, ever since 9/11, commercial insurance policy purchasers can add something called TRIA, or terrorism coverage. It's my educated opinion from what I've been reading is that I'm thinking coming out of this COVID-19 thing, the federal government just might come out with a program in the future that would put together not only a terrorism endorsement or rider to a policy, but also one for a pandemic. But that doesn't exist today, the pandemic part. Okay, so a lot of the questions I'm getting from my clients is, you know, there's coverage in a commercial policy called business income or extra expense, a business interruption coverage, business continuation coverage is another name for that. That has to be happening to the individual, so to speak, if there's a covered cause of loss. All right. So, for example, you know, there's a fire and they're not able to open the restaurant, for example, or there is some other damage to the location, or there is you know, prohibitive access due to a covered cause of loss. So that could be something like a windstorm is blowing trees down and prevents access to that location. That is a covered loss. Governmental authority is one of those exclusions, so that's not a covered loss. So long story short, governmental action such as we have here because of the COVID-19 does not cover you know, business interruption for that, or loss of income. All right. Any questions on those parts?
Any other questions for Riko while we have him? So we will, thank you, Riko. We will put all that information out on the follow-up email that we send out along with the video. I just wanted to circle back for a moment and reiterate that there was a call that was today, and I was so glad that I had asked the Department of Agriculture if they would please have a conversation. When we were talking a couple of weeks ago, they asked if there were still stumbling blocks in the way for farmers markets operating and what needed to happen in order to get some of these municipal markets open. And I said they need to have a conversation with you, that it's not me that they're going to listen to and believe that it's okay to have a farmers market. It's you as the authority. And so the Department of Secretary Ring and Commissioner Brana are having a conversation with the different municipalities as we speak to encourage them to, especially in areas where there are food deserts and or limited food access or shortage, supply chain shortage, to please consider opening up their markets if the markets adhere to these criteria, et cetera, that have been established for the safety of the markets, the vendors, and the communities. And so we have been working hand in hand with different markets like Howard, like we've talked about today, throughout the state, where markets have come to us and expressed, market managers and or different municipalities or folks in different communities that run as representatives of municipalities run markets and haven't been able to get them open because of city council, et cetera. And I've been working hand in hand with them as well as with Department of Agriculture. VAFMA has been kind of the go-between and the liaison. And so if you in your community are having any challenges with getting any of your markets open, I'm happy to work with you. And or if you feel like there are, we have a market right now that I'm working with the city of Richmond to, the city of Richmond is saying it can only be pre-order drive up. And yet it's a market where there's the majority of the people walk up to the market and they are SNAP EBT customers. And so we're working to paint the picture as to how to move that to a market where folks can walk up and be able to pick up their products, et cetera. So if you're having any challenges in your community or know of markets that are having challenges, either being able to operate under these guidelines and or be able to open for the summer seasons, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm happy to discuss that with you as well as with your city leaders and or the municipalities and see what we can do in order to work with them and state agencies to get them open. Just to reiterate, next week on April 23rd from 12 to 1:30, we're hosting Farmers Market Success during COVID-19 vendor managed pre-orders. This is a very detailed webinar training versus a webinar where we have 5 market managers that are going to share how they've navigated the obstacle course using vendor managed pre-orders. They're going to detail their successes and the lessons learned along with communication strategies, signage, market rules, fiscal structure, social distancing practices. They're utilizing use of volunteers, where they're finding volunteers, payment methods, and more. This is the blueprint in order to use online ordering at your market. So please feel free to, so I highly encourage you to sign up for this hour-and-a-half webinar. There are drive-through markets, curbside pickups, walk-through shopping. The markets are government, private, nonprofit, urban, rural, and suburban. They're really a cross-section. So if you are looking at vendor-managed pre-orders, you need to participate in this because it's going to give you all of the tools that you need, or it's going to give you tools that you're not going to be able to get in one place, I should say. I need to quit saying we're going to do it all because we're going to do a lot of it, but not all of it. And then on the 28th of April from 12 to 1:30, the last of our training in this series is going to be managed online sales. Again, this is a very specific training. This is not just, me talking to you. This is you learning how and what's going on with online markets, how you're experiencing major increases in sales, and the market managers, how they've just jumped right in and put new protocols in place, new practices in place in order to be successful. We're going to hear from 4 markets during this call. They're all using different online platforms. We're going to hear from a market that's using locally grown, one that's using Lulu's, local foods, one that's using What's Good, and one that's using Wasimo. They're going to give you the ins and outs, the positive, the negative, the feedback from the producers. And we're going to look at, they're also all using different distribution methods, home delivery, curbside pickup, and multiple pickup locations. One market has even been online since 2013, and others are brand new since COVID-19. So this is going to be a detail of what to do. Really the opportunity to drill down into some of these online platforms, look at successes and lessons learned, and the communication strategies, market rules, platform pros and cons, experience helping vendors get online, and much more. So this, the next 2 are training specific around these 2 areas. We're going to be talking with experts that have really drilled it down and figured out what's working and what's not, the feedback from the community, from the vendors. So I highly encourage you to participate in these trainings because to my knowledge, there's nothing else out there that really is this embracing. On that note, I am going to say, please feel free. I apologize that we went over the time, but please feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you have any questions or need help in this manner. We are happy to do whatever we can to help facilitate your process. In the meantime, I wish you all a very successful and positive market season, and I look forward to seeing you at the market. Please share with me pictures of what you're doing, what your structure is. Let us highlight you and give some recognition to what you're doing. Invite me to, and share with me what you're doing for your market so that I can see what we're doing. I will also say, not that this is necessarily relevant here, but Virginia is being looked at as somebody that's really setting the example of what can be done during COVID-19 around the country, because there are not many commonwealths that are deemed non-essential, but are operating basically at the level of a grocery store, and that have been working hand in hand like we have on an ongoing basis in order to put all of this in place. And so I'm constantly looking for new ideas of what's working, as well as other market managers are. The last is I'm going to say thank you to all of the market managers who, to reiterate what Meredith said earlier, have been so flexible and have just jumped right in and been able to pivot continuously during this process in order to continue to support the producers and the vendors and those in the community that need the access to the beautiful agricultural and horticultural products that we have here in Virginia. So on this note, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you for participating today and for all that you're doing in order to sustain farmers markets and farmers here in Virginia. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You'll get a follow-up email from us with all of the links, etc., to today. And I wish you good shopping at the market. Y'all take care.
I believe there was more questions about liability. Is that?
Oh, is Riko still on?
Riko, are you still on? Okay. Well,
I don't see him. We'll have to, I'll forward them over to him.
Okay. Janet, if you want to email us at info@vafma.org, or anybody else that still has questions for Riko, send it to info@vafma.org and we'll make sure he gets it. Thank you.
Thank y'all. And we're going to end at this point.